debate in which, and before the 3 hours starts, in which, subject only to the constraints of time and the willingness of colleagues to help each other, my main ambition is to try to maximise participation. We come to the emergency debate. Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if I may, I want to commend all those that were involved in trying to save the iconic Mac building in the early hours of Saturday morning. And if I may commend my honourable friend from Glasgow Central, who attended to make sure that her constituents were safe, and grateful thanks to the fire service and, of course, the fact that they are all safe from this great tragedy for all of us. Mr. Speaker, I would like to start by thanking you for granting time for this very important debate on the issue of the EU withdrawal bill, devolution and the Sewell Convention. And I should also mention that some members of the Scottish Select Committee can't be here today as they're hearing evidence elsewhere. I know that many of the committee members would have wanted to contribute to the debate if they were here. I am grateful, Mr. Speaker, that you have granted this debate, but it is not a substitute for the absolute failure of the UK Government to allow appropriate time for debate on the withdrawal bill, and the failure of the UK Government to protect devolution. Make no mistake, the events of last week demonstrated the utter arrogance and the contempt that the UK Government has for the devolved nations. Scotland's voices were silenced, whilst the Secretary of State for Scotland stood by and did nothing as the UK Government enacted a grab on the powers of the Scottish Parliament. It is notable, Mr. Speaker, that the Secretary of State for Scotland is apparently not leading for the UK Government in this debate. Can the Minister please tell us why the Secretary of State for the Scotland Office is not leading for the Government in this debate when we are discussing Scotland's devolved institutions? He is the Secretary of State for Scotland. He should face up to the debate on the power grab. He cannot hide from what has been a failure to protect Scotland and to protect devolution. Mr. Speaker, where is the leadership? He should have insisted on speaking in this debate, which is, after all, a debate about his ability, or more importantly, lack of ability, to defend the powers of the Scottish Parliament. Is the Secretary of State for Scotland yellow? Will he stand up and defend the interests of Scotland? Perhaps the Secretary of State hasn't got the gall to do so, particularly when we know that the Secretary of State for Scotland came to this House and said from the dispatch box that amendments would be put, that members of Parliament in this chamber would have the ability to discuss what was happening. None of that ever happened. Why was it that the Secretary of State for Scotland promised that we would have that engagement with members of Parliament, and he failed miserably to make sure that Scotland's MPs had the ability to debate this important issue? When he did not bother to show up last week, we saw the Secretary of State come to this chamber seeking to justify the attack on the Scottish Parliament, claiming that these are not normal times. Of course, these are not normal times, because this government is acting against the interests of the people right across the UK, rather than acting in their best interests. I will happily give way.
I'm very grateful to the right honourable gentleman. I have to say, in passing, it's a bit rich for him to say